Okay, good evening. Hope you guys are all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Sanhedrin Peites Amud Beis. We're really starting toward the bottom of Peites Amud Aleph, about 12 lines or so from the bottom. Where are we? We're at the two dots where it says Hamisnabe Mashalo Shoma Kegon Tzidkiya ben Kanana. And we're going to be trying to cover as much ground as possible. I didn't have quite as much time to learn today as I wanted to. Think about having a job. I don't know. Something weird happened today. I'm not really sure. But we'll do my best to try and get us toward the bottom of Daf Tzadi Amud Beis, where we will begin Perek Chelek. Perek Chelek is cryptic because it sounds like you understand. But don't fool yourself, is that we don't understand. So that has to be the caveat. The Art Scroll does a fantastic job giving a preface. I didn't read the Kahati, but usually the Kahati also does an amazing job before each parak. I would recommend, in all cases, to have a look at those two resources as you begin this parak. But we first have to get there. I will be moving quickly. I'm not going to stop you from asking questions if you have. I promise you I don't know the answers, but I'm happy to talk and learning. But let us try and get as much done as we can. I'll say upper limit 9:45. I don't want to go crazy. Oh, I did not mark it. Okay. Still upper limit 9:45. I know, but I had the NCSY dinner. That is helpful. Thank you very much. No, it's okay. Let's see what we get to. All right, says the Gemara, 15 lines from the bottom of Peites Amud Aleph. We've been learning about the onesh of chenek, thus the perek Elu Heina Nechnaken, and a Navi Sheker falls into that category. And there are some iterations of how we would define a Navi Sheker. Says the Gemara, Hamisnabe Mashelo Shama. If a person gives a nevuah that he didn't hear, he heard it from somebody else. He's just quoting another Navi. Zog the Gemara could go on Tzidkiya ben Kanana. Dechsiba Yaslo Tzidkiya ben Kanana Karnei Barzel. He said that he made these horns of Barzel. We're not going to get into what his nevuah was, but apparently he wasn't the one who actually said this. He got it from someone else. The Gemara pushes back on this and says, yes, of course, there's chenek by someone who's misnavi al mashalo shama, but the problem is that Tzidkiya ben Kanana is a bad example because my havalei lemevat. Tzidkiya was cornered. After all, ruach nevos ate. It was the spirit of a person named Nevos who led him astray. How so? Tichsiv Vayomer Hashem mi yafates acha vayal vayipol beramos gilad. Who's able to convince a Navi to make such a statement? Vayetze haruach, which we'll soon see was Nevos. Vayetze haruach vayamod lifnei Hashem vayomer ani yafatenu. I've got it. I'll convince this Navi to say a nevuah that he didn't hear. Vayomer tefate v'gam tucha. The Kodesh Baruch Hu says, Go be mafata, go and convince this Navi to say about the Karnei Barzel, say v'asechet. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yehuda might say, what does it mean when Hashem says, say to the Ruach Nevos, Yetze min mechitzasi, get out, you don't get out from my presence, my Ruach, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rucho shel Nevos ha-Yisraeli. This was the spirit of Nevos Israeli. Again, you got to go learn the sugya. We're on the bottom of Peites Amud Aleph, now 10 lines from the bottom. So says the Gemara, don't blame Tzidkiya ben Kanana, and don't say that he's your example of misnabe mashalo shama, because after all, he was forced by the Eibishter b'chvodo ba'atzmo. So says the Gemara, no, because Tzidkiya should have actually known the difference. Why? Because habalei lemeidak, he should have checked and known that there was. Please head outside. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. So he said that he should have known Kid Rabbi Yitzchak. What does Rabbi Yitzchak say? To Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Signon echad ola lekam nevim. There might be one type of nevuah that's given over to many of the nevim, but the ein shnei nevim misnaben b'signon echad. But if you tell, it's like the game of telephone. If you tell two nevim the same exact idea, their expression of that nevuah will not sound the same. So if HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvod v'atzmo shares a nevuah with the 4 or 5 of you, but the way that you'll carry it over to Klal Yisrael will not be the same. For example, Ovadia, when he got a nevuah, Amar, Zedon libcha hishiacha, the errors of your heart led you astray. Yirmiyah got the same nevuah, but Amar, tiflat sasecha, heisi osecha zadon libcha. Same idea, but different phraseologies. So, therefore, Tzidkiya ben Kanana is a good example of Misnabe Mashalo Shama because he should have known. V'hani mid'kamri kulu ke'adade. But all of these Nevi'im, who in the time of Tzidkiah gave the same exact type of nevuah, Shama mina lo klum ka'amre. If they're all saying the same thing, something's wrong. There's no way the two Nevi'im are going to say the same exact thing. He says the Gemara, Dilma lo have a yada le lahayde Rabbi Yitzchak. Maybe Tzidkiah did not know this rule that Nevi'im are not able, that they don't repeat their nevuah the same way. Says the Gemara, not possible, because at that time one of the key players was Yehoshaphat, and says the Gemara, Yehoshaphat have a hasam the ka'amar lahu dechsiv. What does it say? V'yamar Yehoshaphat ha'ein po navi. Is there no navi over here? And then the Gemara says, Amar lei ha'ika kolhani, and they said to Yehoshaphat, what do you mean? There's hundreds of, there are actually 400 Nevi'im. There are 400 Nevi'im at that time saying the same nevuah. Amar lei, what did Yehoshaphat say? Exactly what Rav Yitzchak said. What he said is as follows: Kach mekublani mi beis avi abba. My grandfather gave me a tradition. Signon echaz ola lekama neviim. It may well be that there is a nevuah that's given out to many neviim, but ve'ein shnei neviim misnaben b'signon echad. End of sugya number 1. Tzidkiah is the example of misnabe mashelo shama, that he is going to be chayiv chenek. Hamisnabe, 6 lines from the bottom. Hamisnabe mashelo ne'emar lo. Let's say that a person says a nevuah that was not said to him. Kigon Hananya ben Azor. Deka Yirmiyah b'shuk ha'elyon. Yirmiyah was in the upper shuk, and he made a nevuah. And then this person, Hananya, made a tzushtel of his own. It wasn't actually a quote. He changed what he heard. He played telephone, and we'll see exactly what it was. V'ka'amar, what did Yirmiyah say in the Shuk Elyon? Ka'amar Hashem tzvakos hineni shoveres keshes Elam. This is talking about the people who were helping to destroy Yerushalayim, and Elam was a group of people. They were not Bavel. They were. It's not Iran. It's Hamas. It's one of the nudniks on the side, right? So says the Gemara that that was the nevuah of Yirmiyah, that Elam is going to be lowered down and easier to beat. And Nosach Hananya Kal V'chomer Ba'atzmo. He said, well, Ma Elam, who was a secondary organization, again, Hamas, the Houthis, whoever you want to say, they're not the Iker. So Ma Elam Shalo Ba'el Lazar as Ba'el Amar Kodesh Baruch Hu Inani Shover as Keshes Elam. I'm going to make it easier to beat them than the Kastim, which is synonymous with Bavel. Kastim Atzmon Alachas Kama V'Kama. So that says the Gemara, okay, gotcha. Asaiu b'shuk tachton. So then this Hananya ben Azor in the shuk tachton, away from Yirmiyah, he heard what Yirmiyah said about Elam and made it sushtel about the Kastim. And Omar Komar Hashem Shavarti es ol melech Bavel. That is not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu said was about Elam, and he said it to another person. It says the Gemara, this isn't a good example. After all, 3 lines from the bottom, Amar le Rabbi Abba le Abaye. Even Yirmiyah wasn't talking about custom. This isn't misquoting. This is saying something different. It's not that the nevuah came from Yirmiyah and Hananya ben Azor repeated it. This is that Yirmiyah said nevuah X, and instead of Hananya ben Azor repeating X, he said Y. So says the Gemara, not a good example. The Gemara says it is a very good example. Amarle came in the ECI of Kal V'chomer Medrash because it's such a pasha to Kal V'chomer. Some Kal V'chomers are layups. That's why we have Kal V'chomers, because they're layups. Some of the Kal V'chomers are difficult. We've learned dozens and dozens of Gemaras with difficult Kal V'chomers that get rejected by the Gemara. Nevertheless, this one is an obvious one. And therefore it's as though Yirmiyah actually said Kastim, even though he only spoke about Elam. And Hunihu, Hanan himself is the Lo Ne'emar Lo. It's an example of Lo Ne'emar Lo. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol nihiyeh b'dvaro. What about Hamisnabe b'shem avodas kochavim? If we have a person who's giving nevuah in the name of avodas kochavim, could go nevi'ei haba'al. That would be an example of someone who's giving avodas kochavim as though it was the prophets of Baal. He's quoting from Goyish Nevi'im. Hakovesh es nevuah. So someone who gets a nevuah but ignores it. Who's that? Kigon Yonah ben Amitai Pasha. His obligation, say for Yonah, Yom Kippur, his obligation was to say what the people of Nineveh needed to do. What did he do? Is this where jumped ship came from? He got on a boat and he left. So that's what the Gemara says. What's an example of someone who was mevater? It's an opposite inference, being jump ship, but I'm just curious if it was accurate. I have no idea. Oh, I was saying that he jumped onto a ship to escape. You're saying he jumped ship and that they threw him off the ship. Right. Right. My father was in the Navy, but he's colorblind, so he couldn't actually be on the water so much. So he couldn't drive a ship, right?
Red lights, green lights.
Well, he's red-green colorblind, so it's very problematic.
I'll bet.
How do you drive a car?
Well, the red is on the top and the green is on the bottom, so. Oh my God.
I forgot. I can tell.
You can tell that light, you can see the coloring? The green light looks white. I've never heard you say that. That's fascinating. Next time. The last time we were down there was for Marcy's bris. That was moons ago. Marcy's son's bris, I should say, just to be accurate. Yeah. All right, let's learn some Torah. 2 lines from the bottom. Oh, we did that. Last few words on the page. V'hamavater al divrei navi. Kigon chavrei demicha. Someone who ignored what a Navi says. Not that the Navi ignored himself like Yonah, but let's say you gave me a nevuah because you're a Navi and I ignored you. Who's that like? Says the Gemara, top of Peites, like the friend of Micha. Dichsi. There was a man who was a children of the Vim, referring to Micha. Amar el re'ehu bidvar Hashem. He said to his friend, Hakeni, no, I want you to hit me. And the friend did not do that. And then Uchsiv, if you look at the rest of the pasuk, he got killed. So when you get a nevuah, when he says jump, you say how high.
Even if it's to do an Avera.
Even if it's to do an Avera, as we'll soon see, with the exception of Avodah Zarah, which is very schwer. But that's what the Gemara says, as we'll soon see. Next, the Navi she'avar al divrei atzmo. If there's a Navi who violates what he heard, kigon ido hanavi. That's like ido hanavi d'chsiv. This is a pasuk from Sefer Melachim. Kichein siva osi. I was commanded. The pasuk says not to eat food at this person's house. Uchsiva yomer lo. Another Navi said to him, Gamani Navi kamocha. Uchsiva yeshev ito. And then he did sit down and eat with him. So he broke his own nevuah. And says the Gemara, Uchsiva yelech b'mse'ehu aryeh. Guess what? A lion found him and made him dinner. So that therefore we see that you're not supposed to turn down a Navi. Now, this doesn't skirt the concerns of Navi Sheker. We got to look into that and figure out how to know what to do when these things happen. Right now, we have no nevuah with the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. When they exorcised, with an O, when they exorcised the capacity for Avodah Zarah, we also lost our capacity for nevuah, because those are 2 sides of the same coin. Super deep connection, right? We lost that.
What's the difference in the last case of Yonah?
Yonah was kovesh his own nevuah. He got a nevuah and ignored it. This was chavrei de Micha. Micha gave a nevuah to someone, and the friend ignored it. So those are different. 7 lines down on page. We exorcise the desire for Avodah Zarah.
Did we just shift the form of what Avodah Zarah is?
We do worship different things now, but the desire is not equivalent. The Gemara elsewhere says that if we lived in that era and there was Avodah Zarah, we would have picked up our tunic and run to do Avodah. We can't fathom. Like even today, like if there's another religion, we're like, they got it wrong. We don't even like blink, you know? But back in the day, when there was an Avodah Zarah, people really had I would say the Yetzer Hara that's equivalent for sexuality is probably similar. Again, I'm just from what the Gemara says. It seems similar to how people behave.
Modern addictions to whatever.
Yeah, we're addicts. We're addicts, but it seemingly is a different, because we don't desire deities. We don't. Avodah Zarah is a specific desire for connecting to a deity of another religion, lowercase d. But that's you're right. I'm asking on a functional level that we're addicts to our phones. We're addicts to other things.
No idea.
That's what I'm saying. Well, we understand the draw in other areas.
Yeah.
We don't understand the Dimyon's probably correct, but we actually have correct. And by the way, even for arayos, but we have a social discipline around arayos. Even if we're not disciplined halachically, like I never want to get caught, I don't want to do it. I have to have good boundaries, There's a Rav that I know who runs a camera in his office 24/7. No audio. No audio, because he wants the conversations to be private. And he tells them, he said, this video goes nowhere, but if you ever make a claim against me, this will be a raya brura. Yeah, my office has a window in it. I didn't even ask them to put it in. It just happens to be that way. It's better that way. Matovu manaim. Everyone walks by, they can see it.
Modern day offices always have my glass walls now.
Yeah, the OU has all glass walls. They're partially frosted up to like 4 feet.
Completely glass.
Yeah, completely see-through glass. Yeah, absolutely. You need to now because it's such a litigious culture and people misunderstand things and people are inappropriate. So with all those things factored in, the lawsuits and yeah. And in the state of Illinois, and when I was an employee of the OU, I had to do a sexual harassment training in my state. And my team at the ATT, we're setting this up now for our next fiscal year. These are cartoons. I had to make sure they're kosher. They're cartoons of what sexual harassment could look like, verbal, all those kinds of things. Yeah, we have. I think the Dimyon is correct, but it's in a different space. It's in a different space.
It's the book. I don't have any idea
Probably.
of what it means because I otherwise.
Probably. But again, back in the day, the social pressures to not do avodah zarah were not as strong as our social pressures to keep ourselves together when it comes to our rayos. My Rebbe treats a laptop. My Rebbe Mufak, who taught me in Smicha, he holds stark Hilchos Yichud with a computer. He will not be alone with a device that has access to the internet. And you know what? I thought it was crazy when I first heard it. And now I think he's the smartest guy in the room. 25 years later, 20 years later, it's just such a simplicity. Halacha nailed it. Hilchos Yichud, don't be stupid. It's like, it's a baseline. Don't be stupid. It's just so good. So good. Next, 8 lines. Oh, we're never going to finish. 8 lines down, pay testament base. Maybe 10 o'clock's our limit. Tani Tana Kamid Rav Chizda. HaKovish es nevuah soloka. Who was that? Right? We spoke about this. That's Yonah ben Amitai. If you're kovesh or nevuah, you get malchus. Amar le man do'achel tamer be'arba lalaki. How do you know? This is a mashal. If you ate dates out of a colander, why would you get malchus? Really, what's happening is the next question. Man masribe. Where was the hasra? How would anybody know he got a nevuah? He's a navi. How would anybody know? So it says the Gemara, Amar Abai Chavre Nevi'eh. His friends who are Nevi'im know that he got a nevuah. There's a little triangle happening. A Kodesh Baruch Hu, Navi number 1. The rest of the Nevi'im, they all seem to know. Mino Yade, how? Why? If Yonah knew, other Nevi'im knew. If the other Nevi'im knew, why weren't they held accountable like Yonah was? So it says the Gemara, Amar Abai Dechsiv Ki lo yaseh Hashem Elokim davar ki im gila sodo. He would share it with other people. There's apparently, again, what do we know about nevuah? But nevuah was apparently shared with others. Vidil Mahadri Bey. Perhaps it was the case that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Mahader, he went back on the nevuah. Well, I guess in theory that's possible, but Im Isa Tahadri Bey, Odu'e Havu Modae Lakulu Nevi'eh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to change his mind, which sounds weird, but if he's going to change his mind, he'll let everybody know. Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu said that he was going to be mishapech the whole city of Nineveh. Says the Gemara, you're right that that's what he said, but who knows what that means? Yonah me'ikara Nineveh nehepeches amrila. He said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had said that they were going to flip around Nineveh. What does it mean to flip around Nineveh? Ihu lo yada. What Yonah didn't know is ilatova ilira. Yes, it flipped around. Which way? It flipped around like it got destroyed, or it flipped around like they did tshuva. So he didn't know. Next, quarter of the way down. Third.
Weird. He didn't know why he break it up. He had good news for them.
Excellent point.
But if it was bad, then he said that they were killing because I was getting that.
But why not the good news? Yeah, but Kasha, if he knew it was good, or maybe he just didn't know. He didn't know which one. That's what the Gemara says. That's the answer. Ninde nepeches. He's like, I don't know which way this is, but I can tell you that because
this summer should be wrong. That's what.
Right.
It was always meant for good. Always meant for good.
He misunderstood.
That's why he didn't go.
But in his head, it was either this or that. Yeah. Textual mechaber into Rashi. Amavater al divrei navi. If someone ignores a navi, mina yada dei anish. How do we know that this person should be punished? The Yavalei os, because there's going to be a little bit of a sign. There will be some kind of sign that this guy is going to be punished. The case of Micha at the top of the page, there was no sign that this guy was going to be punished, yet he was still punished, says the Gemara, because where you have a Navi that's a muchzak, like Micha, shiny, that person's different. And now we're going to get into a conversation about Avram Avinu and Akedas Yitzchak. Not surprising, of course, relevant to the parshios of recent. Says the Gemara, Dilote Machi Avram Bahara Moria, Hecha Shamaleli Yitzchak. Why would Yitzchak even listen to him? It's murder, it's retzach, it's a pasuk in Chumash that you're not allowed to kill people. Elio Bahara Carmel, he asked him to do a shchita that was shchutei chutz. Hechi Samche Lev Avde shchutei chutz, Ela Hecha de Muchzak Shiny. If you're a low-level Navi, you're a rookie, you got your first nevuah. Okay, so then we have to check our boxes to make sure you're kosher yosher. But at the end of the day, we listen to you as long as there is an os. That's where all the movies got it from. That this prophet is going to give us a sign. You know, he'll do a miracle. Doesn't apply to neviim that are muchzak. Avram, Micha, muchzak. Let's get into the story about Avram. Halfway down, almost. After these things, what things? The Torah doesn't say what these things are. So, what happened? Two answers. Here's answer number one. The next one's 8 lines from the bottom of the page. Let's see what happened. The Satan said, Yitzchak was weaned. You gave this guy who's 100 years old the schus of having a child. From all the meals that he had, no birds. This guy doesn't appreciate you, the Satan says to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Amar lo, Kadosh Baruch Hu says back to the Satan, you don't think this guy would do everything for his son? Imani omer lo zovach es bincha lefanai miyad zovcha. Kadosh Baruch Hu says to the Satan, you think this guy is not going to say thank you to me? He said, I'll show you. If I ask Avram to sacrifice his child, he would do it unflinchingly, which is so hard to fathom. Says the Gemara, miyad v'elokim nisas Avram. That's what the pasuk means. Now let's read the pasuk again. Where the Satan pushed HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Hashem said he would even be willing to shech his son. Then the pasuk says, oh, let's see it. Let's bring it up. Vayomer kachna es bincha, bring your son. Amar Reb Shimon bar Abba ein no ela lashon bakasha. Why is the HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying please? Because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu kaviyachol had something to prove to the Satan, and he didn't want to be let down by Avram. So he asked him nicely. Says the Gemara, the guy had a lot of wars. This king had a lot of wars. He had a warrior. This guy was he was an abnormal human being. He was a great fighter. He was massive. He won every war for them. What? First round draft pick. Yeah, he's a Navy SEAL times 10. After that, then there was a new battle that came about. Amar lo, the king says to this first round draft pick, I need you to help me win this war. I don't want them to think that all my previous wars were a zero. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu Amar Avram, says the Gemara, the same exact thing is true with Avram. We know that Avram was tested with 10. The last one was Akedas Yitzchak. So we've had a lot of nisyonos. And you made it through all 9 of them. Please, this is where the na comes in. And then one of the most famous Gemaras about Akedas Yitzchak, as bincha, what did Avram say? Beis banim yeshli. What do you mean? As I have 2 kids. Es yechidcha, the one that is a yachid, the one that is special. This one is special to my wife. This one is special to me. I share ahavta that you love. I love both of my children. Sadik Rosh, I love both of my children. Es Yitzchak. Why did you just say Yitzchak out of the gates? Just say what you want. Just be straight. Akam's razor. Just say Yitzchak out of the gates. Says the Gemara, teaching us a hashkafa, an approach when there is bad news. Kedei shelo titarev daito alav. He didn't want to T-bone him with this information. He wanted to make sure that he was able to slowly process. Because what happened the first time? As Bincha, he's like, I don't know which son. So maybe it's this one, maybe it's that one. So that process of going slow was very helpful to him, to Avram, in order to not go crazy. Kadmo Satan laderech, and then the Satan got in the way as he was walking. Amar lo hanisa devar elecha tila. You're going to say, says the Gemara, that that you're going to do something that's going to leave you all fallen apart. Tila means fallen apart. How can that be? You start to Rabin, you've given musr to so many. Yadayim rafos techazek. The hands of the weak you've strengthened. Koshel yekumun malich. You've helped so many people be strong. Now you're going to go do this thing. You're going to be depressed and you're not going to be able to function anymore. How can you sacrifice your own child? It's bad. Omar lo ani betumi elech, ani besumi elech. I am a wholehearted person. Whatever the Eibishter says, I do. Amar lo halo yirasecha kislasecha. Your fear is going to be your stumbling block. Your yira shamayim is too much. You're too from. You're too from. Satan says to Avram. Amar lo Zacharna, remind me. Mihu naki avad. Has there ever been a case when a person was a naki and he would lose out in the scheme of things? Yes, I'll lose my son, says Avram, but I won't lose out in the long run, says Avram. So says the Gemara. Kevan the Chazad the Loka Shmiele, when the Satan saw that Avram was ignoring him, Amarle, Ve'elai davar yugunav. There was something that I stole, meaning I heard something. Kach shamati me'achorei apargod. I heard from behind the curtain. Aseh le'ola, ve'ein yitzchak le'ola. I heard you don't need to kill your son. There's going to be an ola. Amar lo, kach onsho shel b'dai. Here's one of the punishments of someone who's a trickster. She'afilu amar emes ein shomen lo. The boy who cried wolf. The more you keep talking and you keep rambling and you say things that aren't true, in due time, you lose all of your credibility. And we all know people like that, unfortunately. They keep making all the claims. This is the best. This is the... Anyone who talks extreme, they're usually liars. Because most things are not extreme. Most things are pretty normal. And the rare time that it is extreme, if you are extreme, you'll have people's attention. But if everything's a drama, then you have no attention. Okay? That was all answer number one as to what the pasuk meant when it said, "Vayihi achar advarim ha'ele v'nisa Hashem es Avram." Reb Levi amar achar dvar shel Yishmael Yitzchak. Really, it was after a conversation that took place between the brothers of Avram. Amar lo Yishmael Yitzchak, ani gadol mimcha b'mitzvos. Yishmael was in the conversation. He said to Yitzchak, "I'm a bigger tzaddik than you are." Why am I a bigger tzaddik than you are? She'ata malta b'shmonas yomim. Vani ben shloshes shana. That's a svara. That's a svara. 8 days old. What kind of decision did you make? I was interviewed by a college student at Northwestern writing a paper. I want to interview you, so curious about your work. First question. How do you feel about being a practitioner of genital mutilation? I'm like, your objectivity is coming through. I don't think that we're going to continue this dialogue. Thank you so much for your time. Shalom, all done. So here, what happened on day 8, the guy on day 8, the boy made no decision whatsoever. Va'ani says Yishmael ben shloshes shana. I just did a tafas dam bris on a 13-year-old. That's a decision. That's impressive. Amar lo says Yitzchak to Yishmael uve'ever echad atam megarebi. You're trying to instigate based on one aver. Im omer li HaKadosh Baruch Hu zavach atzmo lefana and he's zoveach. Says Yitzchak HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Yitzchak, I want you to sacrifice your whole body. You're worried about one aver, that you did one mitzvah with one. I would give my whole body to a Kadosh Baruch Hu without even blinking. So says the Gemara, Miyad v'lakim nisas Avram. Another pshat in the pasuk. That's achara dvarim ha'ela. After Yishmael and Yitzchak argued about who was a bigger tzaddik. By the way, who knew that Yishmael was even arguing to be a bigger tzaddik? The Gemara says he thought he was a bigger tzaddik because he chose to do his bris at 13, which is a very impressive thing to do. Next, some machlokos tanaim and their perush. Says the Gemara Tanim Rabbanan, 6-7 lines from the bottom. Navi sheidiach beskila. If there's a navi that convinces a group of Jews to do avodah zarah, he gets skila. Reb Shimon Omer bechenek. Madiche ir nidachas. Let's say that a person convinced the ir nidachas to do avodah zarah beskila. Reb Shimon Omer bechenek. So these are party lines. Chachamim versus Reb Shimon. Let's go to the first case. Navi sheidiach beskila. Why is it that if a Navi convinces a group of people they get skila my time at the Rabbanan asya hadacha mimesis? That's because we have a gzera shava from hadacha to hadacha. Malahalan beskila afkan beskila. Look in the Meforshim for the psukim. We're really short on time. The Reb Shimon, he says, why is it that they get chenek? Because misa ksiva kan b'chol misa amur b'torah stam. If it's only written stam, ena ela chenek. What about the second case that we saw in the Machlokes Tanoim, Madicha Eran Idachas, people who try to convince a city to do Avodah Zarah? So it says the Gemara Beskila. Why is it that the Tanakama holds Beskila, my time at the Rabbanon? Because Gamre Hadacha Hadacha. Oh, or we could actually learn it, Omi Mesis, Omi Navi Sheidiach. We could actually learn it from multiple places. And either way, one way or the other, in all of those cases, it would be Skila. Reb Shimon, who says that you get Chanek and not Skila. Gamar Hadacha Hadacha Minavi. We learn it out from the case of Ai Ligmar Mimesis. Why don't we learn the case of Reb Shimon of Hadacha to Mesis? So answers the Gemara, because done in Mesis Rabim, Mimesis Rabim, I'd rather learn cases that are a level playing field about what's actually happening, which is trying to convince a group of people. The ain't done in Mesis Rabim, Mimesis Yachid. Reb Shimon was of the opinion that if you're going to make a Gzera Shabbat, it has to be a level playing field on the function of the Isser. You're trying to convince a group, that makes sense. But comparing a group to a Yachid, that doesn't make sense. Says the Gemara, Adarabah, done in Hedjot mi Hedjot, vein done in Hedjot mi Navi. Forget Reb Shimon, you're not making any sense. We should have learned it from a comparison of two hedyotos. So Reb Shimon says back to Reb Shimon, once the Navi is doing something as awful as this, as convincing other people to do Avodah Zarah, you still call him a Navi? He's a hedyot shebehedyotos. So we should have done it that way. That's what the Gemara says. Now, this machlokes between Reb Shimon and the Chachamim. The Chachamim hold it's skila, and Reb Shimon holds that it is chenek. We're going to see a machlokas in where this machlokas applies. Says the Gemara, last few words on Pei Tessim Beis, making some headway from Rav Chizda. Machlokas be'oker haguf de'avodas kochavim. The machlokas that we have between the Chachamim and Reb Shimon in regards to whether or not the punishment is going to be skila or chenek respectively is where someone is oker haguf de'avodas kochavim. Rashi, top Rashi, Machlokas Dirabban and Reb Shimon, Benavi be'oker kol haguf be'avodas kochavim ve'omer nitztavesi beruach hakodesh bepi agvur lisnabos lakor kol mitzvahs avodas kochavim min haTorah. If a Navi says there is no longer an Isser of Avodah Zarah, that's where the Machlokas is, skila or chenek. And as well, the kiyum mixas ubitul mixas avodas kochavim, where they fulfill part of the Isser and remove part of the Isser. The Machlokes is there. That's where they argue, is in a case scenario where the Navi was to say, I think that I got Ruach HaKodesh, as Rashi highlights, that there is no longer Avodah Zarah, or part of Avodah Zarah is now mutter. Aval, Oker Haguf de Sha'ar Mitzvot. Let's say the Navi was Ma'aker Tefillin, he was ma'aker achila and Yom Kippur, divrei hakol b'chenek. That's not subject to the machlokas Chachamim and Reb Shimon. Everyone agrees it's chenek. And v'kiyum mixas u'bitl mixas de b'sha'ar mitzvos. Let's say that a Navi says, you're allowed to eat on Yom Kippur, you're just not allowed to drink, divrei hakol pater, then that Navi would not be chayiv at all. Now, let's ask a question on this. Says the Gemara, Tzadi Amud Aleph, 5-6 lines down, Masi Rav Hamnuna. The pasuk says la leches. Let's get the pasuk in context. The pasuk in Sefer Dvarim. The pasuk says la leches bo viarta harami kirbecha. The end of that pasuk, Dvarim Yud Gimel Vav. La leches u mitzvah saseh, and ba zu mitzvah lo saseh. Ve'isal kadaita be'avodas kochavim. If you want to say that the machlokes Reb Shimon and the Chachamim, in regards to whether or not there's chenek and skila respectively, is about avodas kochavim. Asay be'avodas kochavim heichem mishkachasla. Where do we have a mitzvah asay as it relates to avodas kochavim? So the Gemara gives a clear answer. It's here Gemara Chizda v'nitatz. It's the destruction of them. That's a mitzvah asay. So if I find an avodah zarah, I'm supposed to destroy it. That's a mitzvah asay, as the pasuk says, and also in Sefer Dvarim v'nitatz es mizbechosam mishibartem es matzevosam asher rehem tisrafun beish. All of this is the shita of Rav Chizda, who says that the machlokes between the Chachamim and Reb Shimon of skila versus chenek is in a case where the Navi says that I am me'aker the whole din of avodas kochavim. Rav Hamnuna disagrees. 10 lines down, approximately. Rav Hamnuna Amar Machlokes be'oker haguv bein be'avodas kochavim bein b'shar mitzvos. I don't only say, like Rav Chizda does, that the Machlokes is where he's ma'aker avodas kochavim. I hold, says Rav Hamnuna, that the machlokes between the Tanakama and Rav Shimon of skila versus chenek, respectively, applies not only when I'm ma'aker avodah zarah, but by all mitzvos. And the kiyum mitzvos, the kiyum miktsas ubitul miktsas avodas kochavim, and as it relates to a partial retraction of a mitzvah from a navi, that's only true by avodas kochavim. Rachmana amar min aderech afilu miktsas aderech. Aval. In contrast to Rav Chizda, kiyum miktsas ubitul miktsas shar mitzvah tzibra kol pater. So machlokes amoraim. Where is the scope of the machlokes of Reb Shimon and the Tanakama of chenek versus skila? Rav Chizda says it's only when they are ma'aker the mitzvah of avodas kochavim, and Reb Shimon holds it is even when they are ma'aker all other mitzvos as well, any one mitzvah in the Torah. So says the Gemara, we need to ask a couple of questions on this. Tana Rabbanan. Hamisnabe la'akor davar mina Torah chayev. Someone who gives a prophecy to uproot anything in the Torah is chayev. And this is not like Rav Hamnuna, because Rav Hamnuna was of the opinion that the machlokes of Reb Shimon and the Chachamim was even with she'ar mitzvos. But here we don't see that. Here we see that everyone is chayev. And the next part of the brisa here reads, "L'kayim mixas u'levatel mixas Reb Shimon poter." That implies, if Reb Shimon is poter, that the Chachamim are not poter, which is not true. Uve avodas kochavim. When it comes to avodas kochavim, afilu omer. That if a Navi says, today we're going to service Avodah Zarah, tomorrow we won't, everyone agrees they're chayiv. And that, says the Gemara, is not true according to anyone. So we have a triple question over here according to our Machlokes Rav Chizda and Rav Hamnuna. So the Gemara says, and this again requires time to unpack, says the Gemara, Amar Abaye Savar like Rav Chizda, Mataris like Rav Chizda. Abaye not only holds like Rav Chizda, but could explain the brisa that we just learned according to him. And Rava Savar like Rav Hamnuna, Mataris like Rav Hamnuna. Rava holds like and explains the brisa like Rav Hamnuna. Let's break into this understanding. Heading to the end of the parak, we're a little bit more than a third of the way down on Daf Tzadi Amud Aleph. Abaye Amar Lak Rav Chizda, Mataris Lak Rav Chizda, Hamisnavi Lakor Davar Min HaTorah, Divrei HaKol B'Chenek. Okay, this is divergent. He holds that what the brisa means is that if a Navi gives a nevuah to be oker anything from the Torah, everyone agrees that he gets chenek. L'kayim mixas ulevatel mixas Reb Shimon poter. When it comes to a Navi saying some part of a mitzvah is true, some part is not, Reb Shimon is poter, v'hu adin l'Rabbanan. This is not meant to bring a machlokes. According to some Rishonim, this din was actually meant for a totally separate chiluk. When we talk about a Navi who's giving nivud about avodas kochavim, afilu amar hayomi avdul machar bidlu chayiv. We would say he's chayiv no matter what. But the punishments are different. Markid islay. We agree that he's chayiv. The Rabbanan would say he's chayiv skila, and Reb Shimon would say that he is chayiv chenek. All of that is Abaye. And halfway down, Rava Sabar Lak Rav Hamnuna, Mataris Lak Rav Hamnuna. Let's understand Rava's version of the brisa that we saw about a third of the way down. Says the Gemara, how does Rava understand the brisa according to Rav Hamnuna? Because Hamisnabe Lakor Davar Min HaTorah Ben Bavodas Kocham Mishar Mitzvos Chayev. He holds that if a Navi were to give a nevuah to be oker anything in the Torah, whether or not it was Avodas Kochavim or any other mitzvah, he'd be chayiv and marked islay with different punishments. What about l'kayim mixas or levatel mixas b'shar mitzvos? What about a Navi who gives testimony about a particular mitzvah? Yes, you're allowed to eat on Yom Kippur, but you can't drink. You're allowed to have tashmish amita, but you can't eat. Whatever the case may be. It says Reb Shimon poter, which left a difficult implication. Here too, v'huadin l'Rabbanan. How would Rava understand the brayse according to Rav Hamnuna? Afilu Omer Hayom Ivdul Machar B'Dul Chayav Marked. They'd also have their own punishments. A little bit more until we get to the end of the parak. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan B'Chol Bakol Im Yomer L'cha Navi Avor Al Divrei Torah Shmalo. This was what we saw earlier. If a Navi says, "I need you to break halacha," we listen to the Navi. Chutz me avodas kochavim. A Navi says, I need you to be Mechal Shabbos, I need you to eat on Yom Kippur, I need you to skip tefillin today, I need you to violate the Hafta l'Refa Kamocha, whatever the case may be. Except not avodas kochavim. Why? She'afilu mamid l'chachama be'emtza harakia. Even if the Navi makes the sun stand still, it doesn't matter. Al tishmalo. When it comes to avodah zara, we do not listen to a Navi, no matter what, no exceptions. It means he's a Navi sheker and he's put to death. Yehareg val yavor, you're not allowed to die. You're not allowed to do the avodah. Tanya, the Brisa says, Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer Higia Torah Lasov Daita Shel Avodas Kochavim. The reason why is because the Torah went all the way into the mindset of Avodas Kochavim. Lafichach Nasna Torah Mem Shalaba. The Torah is more powerful than Avodas Kochavim. She'afilu Mamin L'Chochama Bem Tzorki Al Tishmalo. Even if the sun were to stand still, we would not listen to the Navi. Says the Gemara, this is ridiculous. Tanya, 6 lines before the parak change. Amar Rabbi Akiva Chas v'Shalom. Shakadosh Baruch Hu Mamid Chaman LaOvrei Ritzono. If you want to know where the phrase Chas v'Shalom comes from, it's from the Tanaim. Rabbi Akiva said it, and it is a phrase that we have carried with us generation after generation, and it is a good phrase to use when appropriate. He said, absolutely not. Shakadosh Baruch Hu Mamid Chaman LaOvrei Ritzono. Elakagon Chananya, who must we be talking about? We must be talking about Chananya ben Azor, who we learned about on Peites Amud Beis. Shemitchilaso Navi Emes, who in the beginning was a Navi Emes, Ulevesof Navi Sheker. So for him, the sun could stand still, but at a later point, he became a Rasha. The last din that we saw in our Mishnah that we had learned the other day, that we learned yesterday, was V'zomamei Bas Kohen, the Eidim Zomamin, who testified, and they were liars, about a Bas Kohen Shezinsa. What's the punishment of a Bas Kohen Shezinsa? The punishment is Sreifa, but he doesn't get Sreifa. Umanani Mili, how do we know this? Amar Rav Acha Bareder of Ika de Tanya. The Brisa writes, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Matam Olomar Vasisam Lo Kasher Zomam La'asos La'achiv. What does the pasuk mean that you should do to him like he wanted to do to his friend? Lefi Shekol HaMizumamin, anyone who is an Eid Zomim Shabbatorah, Zomim Mehen Uvo Alehen Kayotze Bahen, everybody gets the same din, but Bas Kohen, he b'sreifa, ve'ein bo'ala b'sreifa. The Bas Kohen would normally get a sreifa, but the person that she cohabited with should not get sreifa, but rather chenek. So now we're stuck. Because think about this, the Eidim Zomamin gave testimony on 2 people who cohabited, but her punishment is sreifa, and his punishment is chenek. So how do we decide, Eidim Zomamin, how do we decide what the punishment was? They tried to bring into reality a punishment for 2 people of different capital punishments, sreifa and chenek. So what do we do? So it says the Gemara, you're right, Zomamin, Eini Yodea, Im Lo Hukshu, do we compare to him, to the man who doesn't get sreifa, or Im La Hukshu, or do we compare to her and give the Eidim Zomamin sreifa? Omer lasos le'achi. We look at the man's punishment, and therefore la'achi v'lo la'achoso. The reason why Eidim Zomamin by a Bas Kohen Shezinsa doesn't get sreifa is because we follow the man's punishment, and the man's punishment is not sreifa. Hadron alach eluena nechnaken. We're now bekiyin and chenek. We should come back to this daf in 7.5 years. This might be one of the most famous mishnayos in the world. It's certainly up there in the top 10. Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek l'olam haba. Baruch Hashem.
First one.
First, touche. I agree with that. The true story, because the rest of it is memorable in certain ways. But absolutely a true statement. All Jews, they have a portion in the next world. Shnemar v'amech kulam tzadikim. Your nation, they're all righteous. La'olam yirshu aretz. They are going to inherit the land. Neitzer mata'oi, the derivatives of the branches. Masayot lispar. They are the making of my hand, and they should be glorified. Now, according to some Rishonim, this line was only written for the second line. The following people don't have olam haba, and we should, of course, avoid these. If somebody says that there is no tchias hamesim, even people who read books that are outside books. We'll learn about what outside books means in the Gemara, not today, but over the course of the week in Yirtzeh Hashem. Anyone who says an incantation over a wound, this doesn't sound so bad, but we'll see in the Gemara later why it's not so geschmack. B'Shaul Omer, Af Ahoge es Shem be'osioso. Someone who reads the Shem Hashem as it's written with vowels, that person also has no chelik in Olam Haba. Right? So we know that the Yud has a Shva underneath, and the Hey has a Kamatz underneath. We should never read it that way. We always read it B'Shem Adnus, Ado, followed by Noi. And just to stand on a soapbox for a second, the word Adonai is not Hashem's name. Adonai means my masters, right? This is my yad. These are my yadai with a patach. A patach and a kamatz could kill you, right? The Gemara says, if you don't say the right word, my daughter does this a lot. I'm like slowly teaching her. It's not with a patach. It's with a kamatz. There's a Balkori in our community who lanes with no difference between a kamatz and a patach except for Shem Hashem. Vaidaber Hashem, but there he says with a noi al Moshe Limor. Every other kamatz is a patach except for Shem Hashem, because he's correct. Hashem, the Shem Hashem with a patach is pashat, not Shem Hashem. So we should be careful about it. Shlosha malachim va'arba hediotos. There are 3 kings and 4 simpletons that ein lam chelek l'olam haba. Shlosha malachim Yerubbaal, Machav, and Menashe. These 3 kings, they're done for. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Menashe yesh lo chelek l'olam haba. Rabbi Yehuda argues and says he does have chelek l'olam haba. Shemar v'yispalei lo v'yishmat chinaso v'yishvei Yerushalayim l'malchuso. That seems that he did get some tshuva. He davened to Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu heard his supplications, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu put him back in Yerushalayim as king. Amr lo l'malchuso heshivu. No, the pasuk says he only got back his malchus. But v'lo l'chaya olam haba heshivu. He did not get back his olam haba. He's still down and out. Arba hediotos. Bilam adoag v'achitofel v'gechazi. These people also, these 4 also don't have a chelik in olam haba. Obviously, we will discuss this down the road. The kol lama. What's with all the drama? Says the Gemara Tana. Who kafar b'tchias hamesim? If there's a person who doesn't agree in tchias hamesim, lefichach lo haya lo chelek b'tchias hamesim shkol midosav shel kadosh baruch hu mida keneged mida. You don't believe in tchias hamesim? Guess what? You're not going to have it when you die. So we have an obligation. It would be strategic of us to believe in tchias hamesim. How do we know that the nature of a Kadosh Baruch Hu is to function midah keneged midah? You act in one way, and a Kadosh Baruch Hu will act in kind. Shneimar, because the pasuk says, "Vayomer Elisha shimud dvar Hashem ka'es machar sa solas b'shekel b'sasayim se'or b'shekel b'se'ar shomron." So there was a nevuah of Elisha that there was going to be food tomorrow. They were in the middle of a siege. They were all trapped in a city. They were running out of food, and he said that tomorrow there's going to be food by the gates. Asher hamelech nishan al yado es ha'isha elokim. There was a man standing there, a third party, and he said, "Vayomer hinei Hashem oseh arubos b'shamayim yad davar hazeh." I don't believe you. How could you say that, Elisha? And then Vayomer hincha roa beinecha umisham lo tocha. Elisha says back to him, "You think that you're going to win against me? Are you crazy?" And he said, "You will not get the food, but the food will be there." Turning to the top of Tzadi Yamud Beis, trying to cover ground. We'll stop at 9:45 or so. Uchsiv says the Gemara by he lochein. This is exactly what happened. Vayimrasu oso ha'am b'shar vayamos. All of the people there who were soldiers, all the soldiers ran away. There was some behola there. The soldiers ran away, and all of their food that they had for the war was dead. They had great food. But this guy, the shalish who questioned Elisha, vayamos, he died. Maybe it wasn't that it's midah keneged midah. Maybe Elisha cursed him and he died. Says the Gemara, no. Well, actually, before that, to Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amarav kila la'aschacham afilu al chinam hiba. If you have a kila la'aschacham, then that's very powerful. Says the Gemara, no. Imkein lichtov kra vayirmesuhu vayamos my b'sha'ar al iske shar. Says the Gemara, because of the extra word in the pasuk of shar, we therefore know that one is going to be punished midah keneged midah. That's exactly what happened with Elisha and this other person. Says the Gemara, Tzadi Yamud Beis, 6 lines down, 5 lines down, Minan Tchias Hamesim Min Torah. Where do we see that Tchias Hamesim is found in Chumash? Says the Gemara, Shenema v'nasatim menu is Trumas Hashem. Who are we going to give Truma to? LeAaron HaKohen. Aaron LaOlam Kayam? Is Aaron going to live forever? Pashat Aaron's not going to live forever. Oh, so says the Gemara, not only is he not going to live forever, but he never stepped foot in Eretz Yisrael. How can Aaron always be the one in the future to get it? Elamai, says the Gemara, in the future, there's going to be a time. Could you imagine when Aaron HaKohen is going to be in the Beis HaMikdash receiving Truma from the Kohanim? Avi, get ready to give your truma to, well, you're a Kohen. Maybe you'll give a little bit to Aaron. You'll get it. Yeah, you'll get it. Who should we give to, Avi or Aaron a Kohen? What would Aaron a Kohen say? What? Oh, you have an Aaron. Aaron the Kohen, Gottlieb. That's what the Gemara is missing. We need a little bit of a Hagos Habach here. Mikan l'tchias hamesim min haTorah, because the pasuk says that it's going to be given to Aaron HaKohen, which never made sense because he was never in Eretz Yisrael. The Bei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, he's like, I think I have a little bit of a more simple explanation. LeAaron ki Aaron, anyone who's like Aaron. And what does it mean that anyone who's like Aaron? Ma'aron chaver af bonav chaver. That anyone who is a chaver, who's familiar with halacha, they will be the recipient. So that kind of offsets the raya. Amar Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rav Yonasan, minayin shein nosnen truma lekohen ha'aretz. How do we know, says the Gemara, that we don't give truma to a kohen who's not knowledgeable? Shneimar v'yom ha'am liyoshvei Yishalem lo seis menaz lekohanim u'levim man yachziku b'toras Hashem. As long as they're going to be strong in Torah Hashem, kol machzik b'toras Hashem yesh lo menas. A person who's strong in Torah, they'll get their portion. And if they don't, then they won't get their portion. When you do give your food to an Am Haaretz as a Kohen, if you give it to a Kohen who's an Am Haaretz, it's like giving it to a lion. Why? What's the feature of a lion that makes it similar to a Kohen who's an Am Haaretz? Ma'ari, just like an Ari, Safek Doris Ve'ochel, Safek Ena Doris Ve'ochel. Sometimes they kill and then they save the meat for later. Sometimes they kill, they pounce right now. Af kohen ha'aretz. Safek ochla b'truma, safek ochla b'tum. We're not sure how they're going to treat it. So you should never give your truma to a kohen ha'aretz. Rav Yochanan Amar Av Gorim Lo Misa. This actually will also cause for death. Shneimar Meisubo ki yechalalu. That's what the pasuk says. That if you give it to an am ha'aretz, then that person's chayiv misa. The Bei Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Tana. Af mesio avon ashma. You'll also carry a sin of guilt. Shneimar b'yisio osam avon ashma ba'ochlam es kodshen. Tanya, we're going to stop about Emir Hashem 2/3 of the way down, 3/4 of the way down. Tanya, Torah. How do we know yet another proof that Tchias HaMesim is found in the Torah? Shneimar, because the pasuk says, "V'gam kimosi es brisi itam laseis lames eretz kana lachem lo nemar elo lahem." Look at that pasuk. I'm making a bris lahem to them, which implies that they're going to be around. We're at the first of the very long lines, tzedek or tzarak, according to some of the gears of the Gemara. Some of the older Gemaras would have tzarak. Gam, geshem, kamsim. Shalu minin es, Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel was posed a few questions by heretics. Minayin shekodesh baruch hu mechayim mesim. How do we know? Amar laminator minavin minaksuvim. We quote a psukim from all three. Velo kiblu meimanu. They didn't accept any of the first three rayas that he gave. They will accept the fourth. What were the first three? Minator dechsiv yomer Hashem Moshe hincha shochei b'mavosecha bekam. You're going to lie, Moshe, with your forefathers and become, and then you will arise later. Meaning you're going to tchias hamesim. So that was a raya. Amrlo, they said back, the heretics said back to Rabban Gamliel, no. Dilma, the pasuk's in another place. V'kam ha'am hazeh v'zana. So maybe the pasuk reads, Moshe hincha shochei b'mavosecha. Period. And then at a later point, other people are going to get up and they're going to be inappropriate. So therefore, they didn't accept raya number 1 from the Chumash. And then Rabban Gamliel provides raya number 2 by Tchias HaMesim to the heretics, Minan Nevi'im, 4 lines into the wide lines, Dichsiv, Yichyu Meisecha Navalti, Ekumu Nakitzuv Rananu Shochne Afar. People are going to dance, those who were less resting in the ground, which means that they're going to have Tchias HaMesim. Kital Oros Talecha, there's going to be a lot of duv, Eretz Refaim Tapil, and the land of the giants are going to fall. He says the Gemara, that should be a raya, says Rabban Gamliel. No. The heretics say back, V'dilma Mesim, Shehechaye Yechezkel. Maybe it was done by Yechezkel and not done by a Kodesh Baruch. Says the Gemara. All right, let's try a third time. So according to the Gemara says in the name of Rabban Gamliel, Minaksuvim, 7 lines into the wide lines, Dechsiv, V'cheikecha kiyein hatov olech l'dodei misham, dovev sifsei yeshenim. The lips of those who are dovev, who are lying in the ground, are going to move. Says the Gemara, that shows that there's Tchias HaMesim in Torah. The Gemara says, "V'dilma ruchushem irachshin sifavase be'alma." Maybe their lips are going to be moving for other reasons, not because of Tchias HaMesim. They said to Rabban Gamliel, but rather Rav Yochanan, Dam Rav Yochanan, Mishum Rav Shem ben Yotzada, Kol Mishin Emra Alacha B'Shmo B'Olam Hazeh Sifsosav Dovavos B'Kever. Every time we quote someone who's not alive, we're learning right now. We're learning Rav Yochanan, Rabban Gamliel, Rav Adabar Ava, all the Rava Abaye, Reb Shimon, the Rabbanim. We're learning so many Whenever we talk about them, their lips move in the kever. So these three rayas, Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim, they were all rejected by the heretics when Rabbi Gamliel was talking to them. What actually sold them was the fourth pasuk that he quoted. This pasuk is found in Sefer Devarim. Asher nishba Hashem la'avoseichem l'seis lahem. Lachem lo ne'emar elo lahem. Mikan tchias hamesim min haTorah. So this pasuk actually worked. V'yesh omrim. Some say that this pasuk actually worked. V'yesh omrim min hamikra zeh amar lahem v'atem hadvekim b'Hashem Elokeichem chaim kulchem hayom. Pshita dechaim kulchem hayom. You guys are all alive today. Ela filu b'yom shekol ha'olam kulam mesim atem chaim. You're going to be the ones that are alive. Ma hayom kulchem kayamim af olam haba. And that is how they prove to the heretics that there's Tchias HaMesim in the next world. We will stop right here, 15 lines or so, right in the middle of the wide lines on Sadi Amud Beis. I don't know if that's going to help us quite enough for the next blot. We'll do our very best, but we're going to try and keep up. We'll pause right here, wishing you all a beautiful night.